We've reviewed 5 general samskaras relating to depression, and they all have the same general approach. The first option is to work with a trained professional. Our coaches at Healthy Gamer are trained to kind of work with samskaras, help you find them, help you digest them. Or you can also work with a licensed therapist or mental health professional. The second thing to do is we have particular meditations based on compassion towards the self or dissolving our ego. So I encourage you to try some of these meditations to see if they help. The third thing is to work on samskaras by yourself, to map them out a little bit in your mind. Do you feel worthless? Where does that feeling come from? And your mind will jump in with logic, lots of evidence that you are worthless. That'll be the samskara kind of coming to life. We're going to use the term anxiety as an example, but you're welcome to substitute your own particular samskara. Start by predicting the environment that triggers the anxiety. When does the anxiety get really bad? What's a really, really terrifying circumstance that would blow my anxiety out of proportion? Then try to engage in that environment, but do so with awareness. So what aspect of the environment is it that actually triggers my anxiety? What is it truly that my mind is worried about? Don't try to fight the anxiety here. Just watch it, question it, explore it. Imagine you're talking to a 7-year-old version of you, and how would you respond to them if they were anxious? You'd ask them questions like, what is it that you're afraid of? Why do you think everyone will laugh at you? And alongside this questioning, try to pin down the feeling of anxiety as carefully as you can. Notice the quality of the feelings, the physical sensations, what the feeling of fear actually is. And try not to get too caught up in your thoughts, because remember that the fear generates the thoughts. It's not the other way around. At the root of all of those anxious thoughts is actually an emotion. The thoughts may seem logical. Your mind may try to convince you that it's real, but remember that all of those thoughts are born of that emotional energy. To put simply, the fear comes before the thoughts. The thoughts don't create the fear. And then ask the question, when have I felt this way before? And see what pops up. You may remember random times from when you were younger. You may remember more recent times. Over time, just notice how many experiences you can recall. And as you recall more of those experiences, you may begin to feel those emotions. And that's actually really fantastic. Even though those emotions may be painful, this is what emotional digestion or processing actually looks like. The more you sit with those negative emotions, the more you're clearing out the mind. And be careful with your thoughts at this point. Sometimes our thoughts will move away from the emotion, or start blaming you, or try to create new emotional energy. Try not to follow your thoughts, but rather try to be in viewing mode. Don't engage with anything that happens in your mind. Don't try to fix anything that happens in your mind. Don't try to justify anything. Don't try to blame anything. Just recall the memories and sit with the emotion. If you want to, journaling is another focused way that you can bring up these emotions and sit with them. And overall, as you work through these experiences, I want you to be like an adult comforting a child. Because remember that the samskara retains the age at which it was formed. So be like an older brother or sister to yourself. What would you say to a younger version of yourself? You wouldn't beat them up for behaving the way that they do. You wouldn't call them weak. You also wouldn't let them give in to their anxiety so easily. And most importantly, you'd be patient with them. Because the one thing that we tend to miss when dealing with our own samskaras is patience. When our samskara arises, we tend to try to overcome it. We fight it. We conquer it. We also end up blaming ourselves because we think that we're so weak and foolish for falling into this problem again and again and again. The one thing that we never do with our samskaras is be patient with them. So tell yourself that it's okay to be scared. I understand that things have been rough for you in the past and that you feel really, really anxious right now and that you've been anxious in the past and it's really hard to deal with. But then what we want you to do is, instead of letting yourself give into it, ask yourself, what do you think you can do differently today? Is there anything that you can do today that's just a little bit different? And through talking to your younger self, you'll end up learning self-compassion because that 7-year-old still exists inside you. And then the last thing to consider when dealing with a samskara is to realize that when it activates, your responses to the situation in the present are actually shaped by the samskara itself. For example, if I've been traumatized by a dog bite, when I see a dog, my response to the dog isn't just based on the reality of that situation, but a gigantic part of my response is actually the samskara energy from the past. When we engage in a behavior, our mind weighs the pros and cons. The problem is that when a samskara becomes active, our mind dumps a huge amount of cons into the current situation. So the likelihood that this random dog on the street being petted by 3 strangers will dash across the street and bite me is really, really low. But in that moment, my mind adds all of the emotional energy, that old emotional energy, into my current behavioral calculus. And in that moment, my brain decides it's best if I turn around and go home, even though the dog is across the street. And we also see this in the cases of relationship baggage, because what relationship baggage really is samskaras. So when we have a traumatic relationship, our mind has that pent-up emotional energy, that residual emotional hurt, that it carries forward into our next relationships. If I had a partner who was unfaithful, I'm going to be paranoid about my current partner. And that's not really based in reality. My current partner hasn't really done anything to earn my distrust. But that samskar, that pent-up emotional energy, is floating around in the back of my mind and generating different thoughts and different behaviors. And so our samskars actually end up inducing self-sabotage, right? If I don't learn how to trust my current partner, then that's actually going to negatively damage the relationship. Self-sabotage is when things are going well and our mind essentially dumps a lot of irrelevant information from the past to try to affect our behavior in the present. And then we end up screwing up a perfectly good thing. And so when you're dealing with a samskara, recognize that in this situation, your mind is carrying forward issues from the past. The actual fear in this moment isn't created by this moment. It is simply your mind carrying over the accumulated fear from all of the prior moments. So remember that the essence of dealing with a samskara is to bring up that emotional energy and sit with it in the present. It's not to perform an intellectual analysis, because a lot of us are kind of overly intellectual and we analyze things and we've figured everything out, right? I have a very high IQ and I've analyzed myself till the end of time. But the problem is that analysis doesn't actually digest that emotional energy. So our approach at Healthy Gamer is to give you different tools to get to the root of that samskar. Bring up that emotional energy that lingers in your subconscious and shapes your thoughts and controls your behaviors. And we've tried to give you lots of tools because in my work as a psychiatrist, that's what I found actually works. That not all things work for all people, that some people actually need a mental health evaluation, and some people need to learn meditation, that some people need to learn self-compassion, and other people need the assistance of a coach to help them define that samskar, find it, and understand how to process it. And at the end of the day, the most success I've had as a treatment professional is when we combine all of these methods. So remember that nothing in this module is intended to be used in isolation. I want you guys to be thinking about the physical aspect of depression. I want you to be thinking about the energetic aspect of depression and do a particular kind of pranayama that boosts your energy. I want y'all to think about where depression and anxiety come from in our minds. What's the emotional component? And I want you to increase your understanding of mental health and mental illness. Understand how it works. Understand the rule book that's used in your brain when it creates certain kinds of mental experiences. And lastly, try to find a spiritual approach to these problems. Is your life lacking meaning? Is your life lacking purpose? Do you actually not understand how your karma is affecting your life? And overall, when people take an approach that incorporates all of these angles, this is ultimately what I see as a psychiatrist that leads to this idea of sustained remission or cure. So I hope it's been helpful, and good luck. What's the first sentence I should say?
As you begin to notice this, you can start to act differently.
And then what's the next sentence you want me to say?
The more you're able to realize this, the
Okay.
Energy will have a hold of
Great. And give me that first sentence again.
As you begin to notice this, you can start to act differently.
As you begin to notice this, I'm going to do that again, okay?
Okay.
And what was that first sentence again?
As you begin to notice this, you can start to act differently.
Okay. As you begin to notice this, Okay. Damn it. I'm going to start it. Okay. What's that first sentence again?